All right, what's going on, everyone? I decided kind of to do a last minute stream today. I wasn't really planning on doing one, but I don't know, I hadn't done one in about a month, and I thought there are some interesting things to talk about. We've also the Heritage Weekly auction is going on right now. I know I always end up pulling that up, and we can kind of watch some of these cool books come up for sale. Now, part of the reason that I mean, just part of the reason, but part of the reason why I didn't end up starting up the live stream right away is there were some books that I was really interested in that were in the earlier part of this Heritage Weekly auction, and so I kind of wanted to have my focus a little more attention, have a little more attention focused on that to see if I'd have a chance to pick those up. And I did actually pick up 3 books from this auction already. So I figured I'd start off just kind of showing the 3 books that I picked up earlier in this auction. I think there's some pretty cool books. So real quick, this is the Heritage Weekly auction. If you're not familiar with this, what Heritage has is the Heritage Auction House has a weekly comic auction that occurs every Monday and Tuesday. They basically do, I think it's like A through K on Monday and then L through Z on Tuesday. And so there were a number of Golden Age Batman books that were in this week's auction. And prior to the sales going live, because basically you can bid on them for the week leading up to the auction, and then when the auction goes live, then more bids may or may not come in. And prior to them going live, a lot of the Batman Golden Age books were looking pretty low, in my opinion. And so I wanted to make kind of like a play at some of these. And so the 3 that I ended up picking up, here, I'll jump to those lots, was 15119. So that is this one right here. So this is Batman number 17. This is a World War II, Eagle cover, a 5.5, nice grade for this book. Because it's got the all black background, off-white pages. But yeah, it's a War Bonds cover with the Eagle and Batman and Robin, everything on it. So I thought this was a super cool book, and I was happy to pick this one up because the record price on this book was $2,400. So I felt like $1,800 getting a deal on Golden Age Batman doesn't happen all that often, and so I took my chance and picked this one up. Then I also picked up, let's see, there were a couple of them. I also picked up this one. This is Batman number 28. Just cool red cover. You can see I've got all the red around me. I like the red covers. I have actually owned this book one time before, but one of the interesting things about this one is this is a white pages copy, and the record for this book in grade and a 4.5 is $870. So getting it for $576 felt like that was, again, just an amazing price for this one. And so for a 4.5 white pages from 1945, I mean, World War II era Batman book, I grabbed that one too. And then the last one that I picked up, let me see, was just one sale later, is this one right here. I've talked about this book a number of times. It is one of my favorite Catwoman covers, one of my favorite Batman covers. And this is Batman number 42. This is the first time you have Catwoman on the cover of the Batman title. Yeah, and I have one right up here behind me. So right behind me up here, I have a 5.0 white pages CBCS copy. And this one that I picked up was a 3.5 off-white pages copy. And so for $12.60, high sale in this book was $16.80. And so I, again, felt like, taking my chance to pick up an early Batman, kind of like a key Batman issue, for a discount. And I definitely acted on that one. But let's see here. Let's jump over to the chat. Because thanks everybody for joining. We've got 25 people in here. We've got L Green Machine, Robert DeVoe, Bronze Page, John Frost, and Troy Guard. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I just felt like doing a live stream tonight. There's some other pretty cool books still coming up later in this auction. There's a bunch of Fantastic Four books, some Detective Comics, some pre-code horror type stuff that's later on. But yeah, if you're interested in comics, the Heritage Weekly auctions are always a good option. It's one thing I like. I like that they come up every single week. Whereas with something like Comic Link or Comic Connect, you usually have to wait 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, sometimes more than that between each one of their auctions. Now, I'll remove this and we'll talk about my little eBay rant that I that I put into the thumbnail for this. This seems to happen all the time with them. I feel like it is, they do not give their sellers sufficient notice about changes that they're making. And so the change that happened was that they increased the fees again, you know, and this is one of the things that I am a big proponent of eBay. I like eBay. I like selling on eBay. That's where my store is. That's where I sell a majority of the comics that I sell. And I like the fact that it's kind of a set it and forget it type thing where I can list the books, then I don't, eBay does the work. That's one of the things I really like. But the problem has been that over the last couple of years, they have continuously been raising their fees, and they do it in legitimate, I call it like legitimate ways and kind of underhanded ways when they're doing it. And my concern is that they don't seem to have a method of increasing their, you know, their revenue. I mean, they're a publicly traded company. They always have, they're wanting to increase their, you know, their profit and all that kind of stuff. They don't really seem to have any good ways of doing that other than taking more out of their sellers. And so then that ultimately ends up making stuff more expensive because sellers then need to raise prices to compensate for the increased fee. Now, it's not a huge amount, but it's that they keep inching it up. So I went back and checked 2 years ago, my eBay fee with my store. And so if you don't have a store, it's different. But with my store 2 years ago, it was 11.5%. Then a year ago, it was 11.7%. And then at some point last year, they raised it to 12. And then they just raised it to 12.35. And so they've gone from 11.5 to 12.35% in about 2 years. That's an increase of 0.85%. I mean, that's an increase of about 7 or 8% in eBay fees. And when you're in what you pay, you know, so like if I say I paid $1,000 in eBay fees over the year, that's another $70 I've got to give them. And so that's just one of those, it's one of those things where they keep like eating away at the sellers. And then they added the eBay fee to the sales tax, you know, then they added the eBay fee to the shipping charges. And so it's all these little kind of like underhanded ways as well that they seem to kind of like sneak more fees in. And so that's my rant about this, because they keep raising the fees and they don't really let you know. Now they had a little notice that went into like your seller dashboard where it's like the winter seller update. And, you know, in there, it tells you, it's like, oh, we're going to be raising fees on a number of categories, but they didn't send an email. There wasn't anything like that. Like I usually don't read those things because it's usually just a bunch of fluff that's in there. But it seems like now I got to start checking those, because what I do is normally because I'm used to them just raising fees randomly, I will check, like I have my little spreadsheet where I keep track of everything that has sold, and I check my eBay fee against what they say it was at the beginning of every month. And that's just in case they decide to raise it, you know, that I catch it early. And at the beginning of the month, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden I sold something, you know, yesterday or the day before, and I checked and I was like, why doesn't this match up? They raised it on the 15th. So the middle of the month, they raised it. So I had to just go back and I had to adjust my spreadsheet and all this kind of stuff. So it's just little annoying things like that where I feel like they could do a better job letting their sellers know that they're making these changes. Send out an email, make it really obvious. You know, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I know that they probably don't really want you to realize it. And they probably hope that maybe you don't catch that they're, you know, they're just nickel and diming and pulling at, you know, more and more fees. But yeah, that's my rant. It's like, they don't let you know. And then also just the fact that they just seem to continue to raise them. I mean, at what point do they stop? Or is it just forever they're going to be raising fees year after year after year? I mean, that was 2 increases in the last year. And so, yeah, so there's something for me that's really frustrating. And so, yeah, I see the comment about my slabs. I know they have the 1%, but yeah, I could go over there, but basically what I do, and so this is for anybody that watches the channel, because I do have a number of people that have reached out, you know, that have bought something from me on eBay. If you reach out to me on Instagram, I will give you a better price because I use PayPal goods and services on Instagram instead of the eBay fee. And so it's like 3% versus the 12%. And so I just give that discount to the person that's buying it, because for me it's all the same. So if you are ever interested in something, you see something on that, you know, that eBay store, and just know that I will give you a better price if you just reach out to me on Instagram. And so that's why I like selling on eBay, but I also, if people reach out to me, I kind of use that as a storefront. And if they reach out to me on Instagram, then I can, cut a better deal. Let's see. And so I see Pure Gosu right here. Plus comics are kind of down priced right now. So that's actually something else that I want to talk about a little bit. And let's see if I can figure out how to do this correctly. Because I have a couple slides. So you saw I had the comic market on there as well. And so the way that I approach my evaluation of the comic market, it's a little obscure, but what I like to do is I'm basically leveraging the information that I'm already capturing from my weekly Heritage Comic Auction tracking. So every week, I've talked about this a number of times when I do like my top 10 list, that kind of thing. There's the weekly Heritage Comic Auction, and I track usually between about 150 and 200 books per week across modern, bronze, gold, and silver. They don't have a Copper Age category, so that's how it's just broken out by heritage. That's what I track. And so what I do is each week I track the new high sales that happen for each one of these books. I also track if the book beats or fails to beat my sales estimate, my price estimate, and if it exceeds it or fails to exceed it by a large threshold, which I set at 20%. And so the interesting thing is that I'm buddies with Swaggle Comics, and so we talk a lot about this. And he has his silver and bronze age, and I think he has a copper one now too, like charts that he's put together where he is tracking the comic market using that. And the interesting thing is his is a much more direct way of measuring it, and he comes up with effectively the same results that I see with my little more obscure way of doing it. And so I'm going to share that screen. Let's see here. Stop screen. All right. All right. So here you can see this. So this is what I show when I do my videos where I'm talking about the comic market. And that's part of it. I haven't made one for a while, and I thought this would be a good chance for me to throw this into a live stream. And so these are the charts that I make that I share when I'm doing this. I have tons of spreadsheets, where I have every single week. I haven't missed a Heritage Comic Auction in over 2 years. I think well over. I haven't missed them in about 4 years, but I've been tracking this data very seriously for about 2 years now. And so what all these lines are is the blue line is the percentage of the books that exceeded my estimate. And so the way that I look at this is that if everything is as expected, it should be hovering around 50%. That means that I am estimating the prices and they are beating them or failing to beat them an equal amount of times. Because when you're estimating prices, you're not going to get the number exactly right ever. I mean, there's a range that these books sell in. But if things are going smoothly, I figure it should be around 50%. Then I have this red line here. The red line is the percentage of sales that are new highs. Then I have this green line, which is the percentage of sales that beat my estimate by 20% or more. Then I have the purple line, which is the percentage of sales that fail to beat my estimate by 20% or more. So say a book I'd estimated as $100 and it sold for 120, it's going to be on this, or more, it's going to be on this green line. If it sold for 80 or less, it's going to be on the purple line. And so one of the interesting things I've always liked with that is that it kind of shows you the times a year when it's maybe really, you find a lot more deals. And that's when the purple line gets above the green line. But let's go back to what I'm talking about here with how the comic market has been performing. And so you can see back here at the very start, where you can see my mouse over this, back in early 2021, it was up to 60% of books were beating my estimate. And they were consistently over that for a while. I didn't catch the very beginning of the year, which I wish I would have, but this is when I started to notice that everything was going crazy. And I was like, I should start tracking this information. And you can see it then went down, and we have these little flows where it just touches 50 and then it trends down again. And basically what this is saying is that for the majority of the last 2 years, the averages have been below my estimates. And that's why we've seen, and that's what we've seen with prices. We've seen prices dropping almost pretty consistently for about 2 years since the peak, or about a year and a half since that peak. But one of the interesting things that I've noticed over the last 8 weeks, and this has been the longest stretch that I've seen this. So this started basically right at Thanksgiving, and it's continued since then. It's just been a constant, strong sales trend where I've been seeing consistently the book selling for about 50%, beating my estimate about 50% of the time or more. You can see I had a couple of weeks that were quite a bit higher where it got up in these, bigger numbers here. And so really for the last like 8 weeks or so, I've been seeing some really strong sales. And now I know that some people say that because of tax returns and that kind of stuff, you'll see jumps early on in the year, but I would generally expect that to be kind of March, April timeframe when people are starting to get that back. And this started back in November. And so this doesn't necessarily mean that prices are going up, but it means that comics are selling for around what I would expect them to. And so that means that, to me, it means prices are stabilizing for now. Now, the problem is every time I seem to make a video and I talk about this, then I start to see this downtrend afterwards. So we'll see if that happens again. But at least for now, prices have been pretty consistently stable for about the last 8 weeks. You can also see there's been some jumps in the new highs. That one's not, you can't draw really as many conclusions from the new high sales. That's why I don't talk about that one nearly as much anymore, except that I thought it was really interesting that back in the early comic boom, 50% of books that were selling for new records. I mean, this was the thing that if you saw this should have been alarming. This is crazy that basically every time a book was coming up for sale, half the time it was setting a new record. That was just nuts. And that's really come down quite a bit. And I have that broken out by age as well. But so now it's much lower. It's usually below 10% for gold, silver, or for bronze, silver, and modern. Gold, because they don't sell as often, you do still see new highs quite a bit. That's usually the driving factor in this. But now let's move on to the next one. This chart is a little bit messy, and so I've broken it out by age later on. But so this is the percentage of sales that are exceeding my estimates, broken out by the age of the comics, where the yellow line is gold, the brown line is bronze, the black line is modern, and the silver line is silver. The gray line is silver. And so let's jump to the golden age. And so you can see this one. Golden Age has consistently been exceeding my estimates for 2 years. And that's one of the things that I've just noticed that has been a trend that I have been following for a while now, is that Golden Age just continues to perform strong. Now, because this isn't that they're necessarily setting new records or anything, they're just beating my estimates, which means on average, they are trending up consistently. And so, like I said, that's generally around 65% of the time. I mean, that is really, really strong. It has dipped below 50% on individual weeks a couple times, but this number is averaged over 3 weeks. And so that's just to smooth it out a little bit. But it's never actually dipped below the 50% with one of the average points. But yeah, Golden Age consistently really, really strong. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about it, why it's just been one of those really impressive areas to me for how comics have performed. Now we go to Silver Age. I mean, look at that difference there. I mean, huge, huge difference. And so the Silver Age, you can see it had already started tanking when I started tracking this in about April of 2021. And it got down to the point where it was about 15% of sales were beating my estimates. I mean, prices were just dropping and dropping and dropping. And you can see over this last time period, it has only touched that 50% mark twice. One time was back in the middle of the summer of last year, and we were seeing some pretty strong sales last year. And now, so basically in the last few weeks, it has crossed that again. And so that's why, to me, this has been something that's really interesting, is that it's not just the Golden Age that's performing well right now. The Silver Age has stabilized in a lot of books. It doesn't mean that every book has. Just like we saw with the comic boom, every book didn't jump at the exact same time. It happened over a pretty wide range of time. You had different books going up at different times, and then you had different books dropping at different times. But at least now it seems that a lot of those books maybe have gotten down to a point where people are like, this is low enough, I am ready to buy again. And for a lot of it, it's been that basically the comic boom period, it's like it didn't happen. That's really how you look at it. If you look at the charts on GPA, it's like the comic boom didn't happen. So that's Silver Age. And then we've got the Bronze Age. It looks very similar actually to the Silver Age. It was still up a little bit when I first started tracking, and then it fell down pretty hard and then was below and only crossed that 50% mark one time as well until recently, until about these last 8 weeks. It has crossed that line again, and it seems like maybe Bronze Age is stabilizing a little bit as well. And then the last one here is Modern. Now, moderns tend to stick around my average point a little better because they sell so much more often. It means that you're going to be pretty accurate, or you can be pretty accurate on your sales because you have recent sales data. And so you can see it does tend to hit that 50% mark a little more regularly. But again, it has started performing more consistently as well over these last 8 weeks. So that's just kind of what I wanted to point out with the comic market, is that, you know, the golden age really had been carrying a lot of these numbers for the last 2 years with this really strong, consistent data. But Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Modern over the last 8 weeks have all stabilized pretty well. And so it's just something that's interesting to me, and that I'm definitely watching to see if this continues or if things start to get cheaper again. I can't say for sure, but I have noticed that a lot of books really have gotten back down near where they were prior to the comic boom. And so I think that's at least making people more comfortable in purchasing things again. All right, I'm going to remove this. I will throw the Heritage Auction back up. All right. There we go. All right, we're back in the here. Oh, here's one. I was just talking about this with Mickey. This is a really interesting one. If you notice, this is a picture of Avengers 48, but the listing says Fantastic Four 48. And so I don't know if somebody has taken a big gamble with this. Like, if they're not sure what they're going to get. You know, are you going to get a Fantastic Four 48 and a 6.0 for like $1,000, which it's sitting at right now? I mean, look at this. It's at 825 plus 20%. So if it is a Fantastic Four 48, they just got a 6.0 for $1,000. However, you know, if it's actually an Avengers 48, they just paid way too much for a 6.0 of this book. Because let's see, I've got GPA here. Let's see, what's a Avengers number 48? Because that's got to be like a $400 book right now, maybe $350. Let's see here, Avengers 48 in a 6.0. So a 6.0 and even lower. Yeah, a 6.0 Avengers 48, last sale $289. So probably right around $275 to $300 for a 6.0 graded copy. This is a raw copy. So usually I'd back out the grading fees, you know, so like $225, something like that. But whoever bought this paid $990, which, yeah, if they end up getting that Avengers, they're going to be really upset about it. I'm sure they're going to be upset about it. But if it's, let's see, if it's Fantastic Four 48, a 6.0 is probably around 1,800, maybe something, maybe 2,000 for a graded copy. So let's see here. So graded copy 6.0, yeah, 1860 was the last sale. So yeah, if it is actually Fantastic Four 48, they got a great deal. But my money is that it's this. My bet is that it's this, because it's actually the picture. So I would trust the picture, not what the listing says. So I think that'll be a really interesting one to see how that actually turns out. All right, I'm gonna go back into the chat because sorry, I don't want to. Let's see here. Golden Age has been humming along in my view. If anything, prices held, most pre-code and hero up. Yeah, Golden Age has really been. Yeah, that's like I said, it's been consistently doing pretty well, and it's across a lot of the genres. I mean, pre-code has probably been the strongest. Pre-code horror has been extremely strong, but I've actually seen, you know, really strong sales in like you said, like the superhero stuff, action, Batman, Marvel Mystery, Captain America, but also Matt Baker romance covers. I mean, just crazy strong sales. If you are selling Matt Baker books, I think Heritage is probably the place to sell. Now, the tricky part is heritage fees are very high in comparison to Comic Link, Comic Connect, eBay. I think so. Like you have to basically, you're losing. Whoop, I don't know what just happened there. All right. So basically, you're losing the buyer's premium, and then there's also a seller's fee. And so you lose the 20%, and then you're also losing like 10 to 15%. So it's like 30 to 35%, unless you work out a deal with them. I think you could, from what I understand, you can usually negotiate to some extent, but still, their fees are quite a bit higher. So, however, Matt Baker books, if you watched that romance sale that happened like a week ago, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but a week ago or 2 weeks ago, just some incredible numbers that were hit in that sale. All right, so Christopher Padilla. Hey, Ryan, I recently picked up my personal grail, Werewolf by Night 32, and they estimated it as a 6.0. When I flipped through the pages, I saw a hole about 1/4 of an inch and was wondering, let's see. I was wondering, when it comes to grading, is CGC going to hit that grade? So it really depends. If it's something that's in the art, maybe. If it affects the story, maybe. If it's in the margins, probably not going to hurt it that much, especially at a 6.0. I had a, what was it? A Tales of Suspense 57, I think, the first Hawkeye, and it was like an 8.0 or an 8.5, and it had a small piece missing from the interior in the story, and it said effects story and still got an 8.5. And it was not a qualified. It was a 8.5. So blue label. So you could take the gamble on it. If you're uncomfortable with it, you could always reach out and see if the person would accept a return if you're not comfortable with it. But at a 6.0, especially if it's in the margin, probably not a huge deal. Werewolf. Yeah, so Werewolf by Night 32. That's actually one. We can talk about that a little bit too. So Werewolf by Night 32 is definitely one that I think has really gotten down to the point where if you're looking for that book, now is the time to be really watching it. It's a lot of the prices have gotten down to where the book was prior to the comic boom or lower. So, I mean, let's look at the 7.5, February 2023. I mean, the way that I look at it is that I basically try to, in my mind, I'm extending a line out from here, because even if we didn't have the comic boom, generally, and not always, sometimes comics are flat, sometimes they go down, but generally they trend up over time. And so if you follow that general trend that's been going on for a number of years, it's basically where the book is right now. And so if you're getting the book around this price, around $1,400 to $1,500 for 7.5 in this case, then that's around probably where the book is at. And it may go down a little more, but I would feel at least relatively safe there. Like someone paid $4,000. A few people, it looks like, paid around $4,000. And yeah, maybe the book gets to that price like out here, I mean, maybe 10 years from now, something like that, it's at that price. But there's a long time, I think, before the book will see these types of prices again. But where it's sitting right now, where a lot of these sales are happening, this is an example of one that I think is relatively safe to purchase. But I mean, there are some books like Avengers 196, the first Taskmaster, that one's dropped below where it was. I mean, it's like there was such a negative reaction to the portrayal in the Black Widow movie that it's like it hurt the book more than if the movie had never happened and the comic boom had never happened. And so there are some where nothing is guaranteed. Anything could go down more, but it's at least your risk feels relatively low there. Let's see. Tracking something like ASM 129 will track the overall market. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some books that probably track better than others just because they sell more often, but it's also different ages perform differently. That's a Bronze Age book. There's a lot more of those out there. And as prices got really high, you got more and more of them getting graded. Whereas when you're moving back to older and older books, whether it's Silver Age or Golden Age, even if prices go up, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a huge influx of new inventory. Now with Silver Age, we've seen that you will. You definitely will, even for big books. That's what happened with Amazing Fantasy 15, especially. That book went up so fast that you had all these people that were just like, yeah, I'll sell that book. And so you got so many hitting the market. That's one of the things I've talked about Amazing Fantasy 15 quite a bit. And on how I was basically saying, I was like, earlier last year, I was like, don't buy that book. I was like, that book is doing what every other book has done before in this comic boom. It was one of the later movers. It didn't move as much early on, and it started its spike much later, and it has come down almost completely back to like the comic boom hadn't happened. And so the interesting thing was, one of the things I had said was that you're going to see these books come up for sale a lot, and then they'll taper off as people realize they're not getting the numbers anymore. And it lasted longer than I thought it would. I was surprised how long we were still seeing, I was still seeing multiple copies in weekly Heritage comic auctions every week. But I think over the last few weeks, I really haven't seen many. Maybe there was one or two over the last maybe 4 or 5 weeks, but I feel like they are starting to decrease in how often they're appearing. And because I think a lot of those books, they got into the hands of new owners, and those new owners, they don't want to sell them now. It's like they've got their new owner, they've got their Grail book, and they want to keep it. And so that's why I expected we would start seeing less and less. I haven't looked at like the Comic Link auction or the Comic Connect one. I don't know how many are sitting in that, but they usually have more just because those auctions are massive. Let's see. I have the same book listed on eBay, Mercari, and MySlabs. 99% of the sales are between eBay and Mercari. Seems that no one is looking at MySlabs, or what I'm offering doesn't appeal to that base. Yeah, that's one of the things. That's the tough part that with eBay, is that eBay definitely has the largest audience, especially for relatively a pretty wide range of books, lower end to higher end. And so yeah, it would be great if we have new entrants into the market, but you've got to then have people that are willing to take the time to list their books there and all of that. And it's like, I put it in so much time listing my books on eBay. I don't want to go and relist them, somewhere else. Let's see. Here we go. I was just talking about AF-15. Do you have a new view on AF-15 today on where that book is heading? So I've been talking about that for a while now, maybe about, I don't know, a couple months, that I was saying I was telling people when we were seeing a ton of books still coming up, maybe 6-8 weeks ago, that you definitely want to be considering like looking at that book. If you wanted to pick one up, that was still a pretty good time to get one, because there were still a lot of copies coming up for sale. Like I just said, I'm seeing less and less copies coming up for sale. And I think it's just because a lot of the grades have returned back to those prices that they were at prior to the comic boom. And so we can take a look at that right here. So let's just take kind of like a 3.5. And so, yeah, they don't sell all that often. Yeah, I mean, they sell regularly enough. I mean, here it's like 10 times a year. But if you follow that trend, this low sale here, so that was probably the 26,000. That seems like it's kind of on that trend line, still maybe a little high, but they're definitely more in the ballpark. If it was the 3.5 going for around 30 to 35,000, seems like it's kind of in the ballpark. But that's why I think it's just worthwhile to watch books. I mean, here's a 2.5. Again, they still seem a little high. I mean, I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if they came down more, but the risk I feel like is lower. But like I said, I would, looking at a couple of these charts here, I wouldn't be surprised if they came down a little bit more. But it all depends. If we're not going to see as many come up for sale now, if people are starting to go, it's not worth it to me to sell that book. If I'm not going to be getting this, peak price up here, I'd rather keep it. Then maybe we don't see as many, and then maybe you start to see prices climb up a little again, because you're going to have a little more fighting for those books. Now, you do definitely tend to see a pretty high base value for this book, because if somebody just to want to get the book, there is, I think there was a really high 0.5 recently. Yeah, 16,000 for a 0.5. You had a 1.0 for 15,000, a 1.5 for 21,000, a 1.8 for 19,000. So across a pretty wide grade range from 0.5 to 1.8, you had 15,000 to 21,000. You know, so it's just like that book is worth probably about 15 to 20 grand in any condition at this point. I mean, that's almost like your minimum buy-in. And I don't know how much lower that's actually going to get. And it's just because there is so much demand just to have a copy. Let's see. Said you'll probably sell your collection on Comic Link. Yeah, I mean, Comic Link it seems like a pretty good option. The tough part is always that they do have so many books that come up for sale in their auctions that I always worry that, you know, maybe it gets lost in the shuffle. But if you ever watched ETA Nick before he kind of like ended his channel, he was a big fan of Comic Link. He sold almost all his stuff there, and so I'm sure it's fine. I like to sell fixed price, but if you just want to, you know, get the stuff sold and get it over with, then auctions are a great option. Let's see. So John Frost, how would you grade a book that would be, well, here, let's jump back to the live. So how would you grade a book that would be a VG, except that its spine is split between the staples and the covers attached at both? So I would treat that like a tear. So however long that tear is, if you, I don't have it right on me right now. But if you look at, or if you go check out like ETA Nick's channel, he has a lot of these great grading videos. And one of the things that he often provides is, because even though he stopped his channel, he still has all his stuff up there. And so one of the things that he often provides is this like little card that it's, you know, it's like almost like an index card, you know, like this big, and it has a bunch of quick reference rules. And so it's like, if there's a tear that's this big, then your maximum grade is X. If there's a tear that's this big, your maximum grade is Y, you know, that kind of thing. Or if it's a stain that's this big. And it's not the best for overall grading, because grading is generally much more complex than one single flaw. It's usually multiple flaws, but it does give you I think there's a book coming up that I'm interested in. Let's see here. I still want to miss it. So give me 1 second. So it does give, but the thing that it does give, yeah, so here's one of them that I thought was pretty cool. This Fight Against Crime number 10. Basically some criminals here that have this police officer that they've thrown into a pit with some snakes. But what did that one end up going for? Went for 528. I don't know if I had that one. I had that one estimated at 400. So that was a really strong sale, in my opinion, for that one. Then I had also checked out number 8. So 308. Well, so that one comes up next. It's an electric chair cover, which I thought, like, there are certain types of content that usually get people to purchase the books, whether it's skull covers or attractive women on the cover, and electric chairs is another one that's definitely part of that. Here, let's see. So yeah, the Fight Against Crime 13. Wow, that's a big sale. I had that one estimated at 325. It went for 720. Wow. And then this last one, 14, I had estimated at 400. It's actually looking pretty low right now. We'll see. It's getting some bids though. But back to your question about the 4.0, basically, if you take a look at that and you see whatever, you know, however long that split is, and you look at that as the maximum grade for that book, it gives you kind of like a high point. And then you can look at if the other flaws that are on there are going to push it below that or not. So that one went for 360. I mean, not a bad sale. I had estimated at 400. So somebody got a little bit of a deal, I think, you know, about 10% below what I had estimated that one would go for. But let's go back to the comments. Short box is the best non-eBay. Got to be slabs though. Yeah, I've definitely gone through short boxed before. I don't think I've bought anything from them, but I definitely have the app on my phone. So any books interested to see in this auction? And so I don't know if you were on at the very beginning, but yes, there were some earlier on in the auction that I was really interested in, and there were some Golden Age Batman books. I actually won 3 of them. So I won a Batman 17, Batman 28, and Batman 42. So yeah, so I was pretty happy about that. I was saying that was part of the reason why I ended up not starting the live stream earlier, is that I was kind of like focused on watching that auction. I was also watching an Instagram live sale at the same time that I picked up some pretty cool books on. So yeah, Sundays often tend to be kind of like a busy time for me for trying to pick up some books, because there are usually some pretty good Instagram live sales that are going on. I've also got the Heritage Comic Auction. There is a Comic Link one that just started the bidding, I think yesterday or the day before, or very recently, within the last few days. I haven't had a chance to go through all those listings yet, but yeah, that one I'll probably check it out to see if there's anything cool that's in there. Let's see. What are your thoughts on the recent trend of CGC graded single pages, some from Batman 1, AF15, have been pulling high numbers, almost worth it to part out a book? So I actually do own a page from Batman 1. So I don't have a problem with the grading of individual pages. However, I do have a problem if the way that somebody got those individual pages was they destroyed a complete book. If it's something where it was, an incomplete book, it's just like I don't know what the threshold would be. But if it's something where it's an incomplete book, and honestly, like trying to piece together a book to make like a married copy is, especially for rare books, expensive books like that, is virtually impossible. I mean, people do it, but it is a lot of work, and it's almost seems like it's more worthwhile to just try to buy a copy already put together. And so I don't have a problem with pieced out books, but if it was at the cost of destroying a complete book, I do. I even though I know, and that's the tricky part, is that it seems like you can get a complete low grade like AF15, and it's worth more if you part out each page. And that seems strange to me. You would think that it would be worth more together. But you would like it to be that somebody wouldn't do that. But the fact of the matter is, if people have a way to make money, there's going to be people that do it. I don't agree with it. I think if you have a complete copy, you should keep it complete. But you obviously can't stop someone from tearing a book apart once they own it. Because I think that happened with an Action 1, and I think it was a complete copy that was basically broken out into all the individual pages, which is too bad. All right. So I thought the other thing that might be interesting here is to check out some of these other books that sold, because I'm interested to see how some other books in this auction actually performed. So let's go down to the bottom here, because the first book was this Action 86, and pretty cool World War II cover, went for $900. I had this one estimated at 700. And so kind of just an example of these early action, early detective comics, early Supermans, Batmans, they generally are performing pretty well. And that's why when I saw those early Batmans that looked like they were underperforming, I was really paying attention, because you don't get opportunities like that very often. And so I definitely wanted to jump on that. But let's see, what are some other ones that sold that look like they're pretty interesting? Because there were some high grade Spider-Mans as well. There was a 9.0 of Amazing Spider-Man number 12. And so that was 15016. So that one went for 28.8. And so I had that one, as I had estimated that at 2,600 or 2,650. And so it beat that. That's actually one of the trends I've really noticed. And I was talking about this with a couple people that I'm in chats with on Instagram, is that one of the areas that had really been dragging down the Silver Age and Bronze Age sales numbers that I had was Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man has been underperforming for, at least a year. And over the last few weeks, one of the things I've really noticed is that Amazing Spider-Man books have been meeting and exceeding my estimates a lot more lately. And so that's one of the things that's really helped pick this back up. And I think that it's just Amazing Spider-Man, especially Silver Age Amazing Spider-Man, is one of the most in-demand types of comic books out there. There are so many people that are putting runs together of this book that there's always people that want to pick up these books. And they just had been getting cheaper and cheaper. And I think they finally have largely reached that point where people are just like, this is too cheap again. I'm going to buy these. And yeah, I mean, 2,800 isn't cheap, but this is a pretty high grade, Amazing Spider-Man number 12, it's a 9.0. You don't have to spend $2,800 to get this book, but it's just an example of that where, these books have just, I think they've gone down enough that in a lot of cases, people have just decided I'm ready to pick that up again. But let's see. There was a 9.2 of Amazing Spider-Man 37. That was 15023. And if anybody in the chat has any books that they're interested in that they want me to check out, I would be happy to do it. So this one, I had estimated this one would go for 1,300 and went for 1,440. So just another example where they just seem to keep beating my estimates a lot more, and they really weren't before. Let's see. Oh, there was a really big sale, I think, on a pre-code horror book that sold earlier in this auction. It's 15. This one surprised me because this isn't one of the real popular covers from this title. Astonishing has some amazing covers, and this one isn't one of the really popular ones, but 1,560 for a 5.5, that is a really, really strong sale. I had that estimated at 750. So this more than doubled my estimate. So, I mean, let's take a look at that. Astonishing number 6. So this is an Atlas, and that's one of the areas I've talked about as well. Atlas pre-code horror, I feel like, has been really undervalued. But okay, so here we go. So it's not like it sells all that often. So pricing, it's not like it's easy, but this was a 5.5. And so what I was looking at, the most recent sale, September of last year, was a 3.5 that went for $443. And so this sold for about 20% above, $100 per point. So I said for a 5.5, it's probably maybe a little stronger because it's a higher grade copy. And so I said 750. So that was like 35% above its, its price per point, and well above where, you had a 4.5 that went for 492 in April of 2021, that kind of thing. And so, 1,560, that is a really, really big sale for that. Let's see what the census looks like. I'm not signed in. There we go. So the census for this one, 32 on census. There are 5, 6, 7 graded higher. But this is the type of sale where if you have this book, if there are more of them out there, and again, it's not like a book that's going to be super common. It's 1951, it's Atlas. But if there are more of them out there, that $1,560 sale is going to pull them out. Like, people are going to get that book graded if they saw that sale, because look at here, like a 6.0, a 7.0, 6 years ago was going for $250. There's not a lot of motivation to get a book graded when it's selling for $250. But when a book is selling for $1,500, there's a lot more motivation to get it graded, because people want that. When you're spending that much, they want that confirmation that the book doesn't have any restoration and, all that kind of stuff. It's complete. So that was definitely this astonishing number 6. I saw that one earlier today, and that was a pretty big sale. Now, there was also just a cool book that I saw come up that I don't see come up for sale all that often in this grade. Was this one here, this first Deathlock in a 9.8, Astonishing Tales 25 and a 9.8 white pages. I don't see the 9.8. I see 9.6s, 9.4s quite a bit, but I don't see 9.8s very often. And I had estimated this one would go for 2,600, went for 3,120. But to kind of put that in perspective, this book had a high sale of $6,700. This book peaked at $6,700. So it's not like this is setting records, but it is getting back to where it's beating sales that had been at previously. More recently, it's actually stabilizing. That's what I'm seeing. It's stabilization of prices. It's not setting new records, but it's stabilization of prices. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the comic market stuff. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I was talking about Matt Baker too, how there's been this trend for Matt Baker books that have been selling really strong. And these were a couple of them. There were these were called authentic police cases. And a lot of these are Matt Baker covers. And yes, you can see Matt Baker cover. And for a long time, these types of books in this grade would be really cheap, like $100, $150, something like that. But we're now seeing the lower grade copies are starting to get much more expensive. It had been that getting like a 6.0 or a 6.5, something like that in the mid grades was really hard to get. And those would go for big money. But we're definitely now seeing that some of these lower grades are selling for big money too. Because I had this one estimated at $325, went for $780. I mean, over double. I mean, this was I was going to reach out to someone about this one when I saw this happen, because I was pretty surprised about this sale. I think there were a couple others. Yeah, there were a couple other ones. Now, the ones you'll notice that do the best tend to have like a woman on the cover, because what Matt Baker was really known for was drawing women. That is what people generally want to purchase the most, are his covers where he's drawing women. And this one you can see has, this attractive woman, in the red dress, blonde hair, all that stuff on the cover. I think there was maybe another one. I thought there was one with like a fire. That might have been, yeah, this one here. 660. I don't know if I estimated this one. I didn't, but we can take a look at it. Again, a 3.5 going for 660. Let's see, what issue is that? Number 24. So let's see if that looks like it was a strong sale. Sorry, I need a drink. So this is just one of those, it's a little more obscure title than what people probably really know with Matt Baker. But yeah, so here you can see you get these really big numbers with the higher grades. And when I say higher grades, if you're not familiar with the Golden Age, this is a high grade, especially for these St. John publication titles that Matt Baker was working on. I mean, getting a 7.5 is not common. But so 1560 last year, 900 for a 6.0. So for this was a 3.5 going for 660. I'd say that seems about right. I'd say it's tough to estimate, obviously, because there hasn't been one of those sales ever in that type of grade. But it's just, to me, what it's showing is that for a lot of times it used to be that you would have these sales here that would jump really high when you have the 6 or the 7.0 type grade. And in the lower grades, it would be in the lower grades, it was much lower prices, $200, $300. So we are really, to me, we're seeing much stronger sales now for these lower grade books. But let's see here. Let's jump back to the live. See what's I don't know what's coming up next. Where are they? They're at 15,339. So the next one, there's not one that I'm personally watching in any of these. There's a lot of Westerns that are coming up. This is this part of the 4-color run. And there's not a lot of books in that I'm really all that interested in, especially with the Western titles. But there is a Giant Size X-Men that's coming up in 20 listings. So that's definitely one that I'm watching. It was already just about at what I had estimated it would go for. I'd estimated it would go for $3,000, and it's sitting there right now. If you hear my dog barking upstairs. So, but let's jump back to the chat. So Comic Link auction got a lot of nice books. I have heard that. I've had a few people send in, some pictures over to me of books that are coming up in the Comic Link auction. And so it's definitely one that I'm going to go check out. This is part of the reason why I generally haven't watched Comic Link auctions too much in the past. And it's because they're almost overwhelming that there are so many listings. I mean, thousands and thousands, sometimes I think like 10 or 12,000 listings in a single auction. And it's just trying to go through that and find books. It's almost too much. So AF-1580 at 25 or 250,000, just all in that book and retire. Yeah, I mean, so that I've had that conversation with a number of people, and it's about, so it's come up when I talk about my keeper list. So whether people call it their PC, or I think I started using keeper list because of ETA Nick. He had this video series where he was talking about his 500 keepers, and that's kind of how he closed out his channel. Is he was doing a whole bunch of videos where he would just show a few books from each one of those each time until he was done, and it was the 500 keepers. And so for me, my keeper list is much smaller than that. I currently have it it's at 34, I believe, right now. I've got it around 35. It's hovering around 35. And I've been thinking about cutting it down a little bit. I used to have it at 50. At one point, it was up around 100. And then I was just like, when it's that many, I don't see them, and so that's why I like having it a little bit smaller. I, can put some stuff up on the shelf and that kind of thing. And so I've cut it down. And so at first I went down to 50, then I dropped it down to 35, but that's always the conversation. It's like, would you cut it down to one book? Would you cut it down to two books? Would you sell all your books or all your keepers or whatever you want to call it, and, trade it all for one book? And right now, at least for me, I don't, that's not interesting to me. I like having different books. I like having different stuff I can put up, or different stuff I can look at, and all of that. And so for me, at least, trading it all for a single book isn't what my goal right now. But I can definitely see the potential appeal of it. It really simplifies things, especially if you have tons of books, long boxes everywhere that you got to deal with. And if you were able to consolidate that all down into, one book, two books, five books, whatever it is, it just, it simplifies your life some. Just picked a Shadow Comics 11, gave it a press and sent it to CGC, hoping for a 4.5 to a 5. There's several pre-code tropes that will hopefully make it valuable later on. Yeah, that was one of the things I talked about in a recent video about what I was calling potentially under. I know I don't really like using the word undervalued. Because it's hard to say if something's ever really gonna go up in price. It's more underappreciated, and I feel like Shadow Comics is definitely one of those that is like an underappreciated run. There are a bunch of really great covers that are in that run that if they were on like Harvey or EC or something like that, they would be huge money books. But being under the Shadow title, they don't seem to get all that much attention. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because they're exceedingly rare and so people just don't see them, or what it is. But yeah, it's definitely one of those titles that I feel like is really underappreciated. Yeah, and really appreciate that, Austin. Said you learned a lot and just passed your 1 year mark collecting in the hobby, and I like to think in a much better spot because of your content. Yeah, no, appreciate that. I hopefully add some value to out there to people that are interested in comics, and hopefully learn something from it. That was actually, it was one of the things I was just talking about this with my brother recently. I was nervous when I started making the video series about building a comic business from $300, because I was worried, I might get some like attacks about selling, because sometimes people don't like when you sell books. And so, but I thought it was a really useful topic because I hear a lot of people ask questions about selling, and I thought this would be an interesting way to approach it. But let's see. There's an Okajima pedigree book in the current Comic Link auctions from 1950. Yeah. So yeah, I now have 2 Okajimas. That if you're not familiar with that one, if you're not familiar with that pedigree, I consider the Okajima pedigree like the most historically significant pedigree. Now, in terms of value, I'm pretty sure it also adds the most value to a comic if it's an Okajima book, especially if it's from the World War II era, when the woman that collected these comics was in one of the Japanese internment camps in the US. And so that's what makes that pedigree just so important and so historically important. It's not just somebody who is like hoarding comics, like that's what a lot of pedigrees technically are. It's like this person hoarded these comics, and so then they made a pedigree out of it. But this was someone who was collecting comics while they were in this Japanese internment camp in the US, and managed to keep them that whole time. And then they ended up getting bought in like an estate sale, basically, by a few different pickers, I guess it was. But they ended up in the hands of a few different shops, different collectors. And it was only, I think, around 1,000 books. And it's only a small percentage of that are actually, pedigreed, because only a certain percentage of them have identifying marks that can be used to find them. And only certain ones ended up in somebody's hands that actually took care of that and made sure that they tracked everything. And so it's a very small pedigree in comparison to what is typically required for a CGC pedigree. And so there's not many of them out there. And if you have one, which I did recently pick up one from when she was in the internment camp, those are really special books. And so that one, like, that's an example of one where I don't see myself ever selling that book. It took me 4 years to get that book. And and just to get the other one, my other copy is one from like 1948 or something like that. And so it's not when she was in the internment camp anymore, but that one I may end up letting go now that I have a copy from like 44. But still, like, those ones, that is a really interesting pedigree, and one that I am always on the lookout for. I definitely have watch lists set up in multiple places for Okajima pedigrees. Let's see. At what price point, if any, do you get insurance on your books? I mean, that's up to you. I have insurance. I have additional insurance for my comics. It's all, I guess it's what you're willing to risk. It's like insurance with anything. Whatever you're willing to risk, like if you had a fire, or pipe broke in your house, or so anything like that, what are you willing to lose? And that's a personal choice for how much you want, what you're willing to lose and how much the insurance costs. There are a few different options that you have out there. I think I have it, Collect Insure. I think that's who I use. But yeah, no, I definitely have insurance, and I have talked a few other people into getting it because I think it makes it so you can sleep a little easier at night. Lawbreakers 11 on the Comic Link auction, got 10 days to move some books. Yeah. I mean, and I don't think you have to pay right away though. So maybe you have a couple more days, but yeah, that's risky if you're buying a book and you don't have the money yet to pay for it. So what's the point of getting a CVA exceptional certification if the book is already graded? I mean, the CVA things, I don't really understand exactly what the purpose of it is, other than, I mean, I know what they are. It means it looks good for the grade, but the reality is most people, if you're buying, here's the giant size. So I had this one estimated at 3,000. It's sitting at 3,120 right now. The way that if you can't tell, the way I do that is that it's at 2,600. Oh, that's a nice jump. It's at 2,600 and you add 20%. So now it's at 3,360. And so I had that one going for 3,000. That was a solid sale, but that was a book that peaked at 7,500. So again, that's what I'm talking about here, where you've got these books that had much higher sales earlier. They're now beating estimates, but they are way down from where they were. But to me, that's just stabilization. This book was my biggest loss last year. I've thought about making a video about that, like my 10 biggest losses on sales. Cause if you're not familiar, I buy and sell comics quite a bit as well. And so one of the books that I bought, like at the worst time, just like peak comic boom, was a 9.8 of G.I. Joe #1. And I lost over $1,000 on that book. that was a rough one, but yeah, I mean, this book is a lot more expensive still than it used to be, but it has come down a lot. I think I estimated 900 for this one. I estimated 875. So it just barely beat it. Yeah. Or no, it just didn't quite make it. It went for 870. So just barely missed it, but that's about as close to perfect as you can get when you're estimating this sales price for one of these books. But man, yeah, that book, I don't even want to own G.I. Joe books anymore because of it, because that was just such a such an unpleasant loss. Let's see. Oh, thank you for the Gemini mailer packing video. Yeah, and I had some people also comment, like, or one, I think it was one person commented that if you're having to ship a lot of books, that is a lot of work to do what I put into that video. And yes, that is true. But I have seen enough posts on Instagram of people where they're complaining, even if you ship something in a Gemini, if you don't have like an extra piece of cardboard, those Geminis, while it's better than shipping it in an envelope, a lot better than shipping it in an envelope. But they're still they're pretty flexible and they can take some damage. It's thin cardboard. It has a pretty good structure because of how it's folded up, but it is thin cardboard. And so that's why I really, have pushed or for me, I always put that in there because it's important to me that the book arrives in the same condition as I sent it. It's also important to me that I keep good ratings on my, like on eBay and everything like that. And so, yes, I get it. If you're shipping like 100 books a week, it's much more tempting to not do some of those steps. But that's then the risk you're definitely going to take, that there's more likely that there's going to be some type of damage. And maybe that's what's part of your equation. If you're shipping 100 books a week, you have to be willing to accept some amount of damage. And let's see, what's this one going for? So this is a pretty high grade for this book. So a 9.2, I had estimated this one at 1,300. So I think somebody's, at least right now, it looks like they're getting a pretty good deal. It's at about 1,100 right now. And this book peaked at 2,300. And especially since there was the announcement that that John Stewart is going to be one of the Lanterns that's going to be in the new James Gunn series, I thought maybe this one would go a little crazy, but it really didn't. I mean, I feel like that was what did that go for? 1,140. Feels like a pretty good price. I think that was a pretty good price. I think somebody got a pretty good price for that book. Then I was also watching this next one, so I'm gonna pay attention to the auction for just a second, see what this one goes for, because I was definitely, oh man, so I thought maybe I'd be able to get a good deal on this one. This is a 9.0 off-white pages, Haunted Fear number 16. It was sitting at 700, or it was sitting at about $600, $690 as of the start of the live bids. I had estimated it at 1,500. And it just hit 1,500. So at 1,250, that's, with the buyer's premium, that's at 1,500. And we'll see if it goes any higher. Oh, so that's as perfect as I can do it. So it went for exactly what I thought it would sell for. But yeah, no, that one, I thought maybe I'd be able to get that one for a deal, but that was an example of where you have tons of live bids that came in. There's another pretty cool book coming up, The House of Secrets, 92. So for Swamp Thing, this is another one that I kind of thought maybe we would see some big sales from this one. So it'll be interesting because I had 3 copies of Swamp Thing number 1. And when James Gunn made that announcement, one of them sold within minutes. The other one sold maybe like 4 days later, 3 days later, and I have one left. So that's definitely, we're seeing some movement on books based on James Gunn announcements for sure, which is interesting because, just for the most part, people didn't really care about DC. But now with James Gunn at the helm, seems like it's getting a little more attention. So I had this one, I estimated to go for 800. And it's just sitting at 720 right now. This book peaked at 1,099. Right now it's at 780. It's almost, one more bid and it'll be above my estimate. Or if it doesn't get another bid, it's going to be just a little bit below what my estimate was. Yeah. So 780. So $20 below my estimate, pretty good price. So let's see. I've enjoyed your channel since I found that last year. I like Golden Age, but my appreciation has increased many times thanks to your fun and stuff. Yeah, I appreciate that. Do you feel that the Caliber Crow books, especially number 1, are inflated? They've jumped considerably. I mean, they're definitely coming down. I mean, that book peaked at, I mean, a Crow number 198, I think peaked around 20,000. I think they're down around 10 now. And so they've definitely corrected. It's hard to say. I mean, it's a tough book in a 9.8. There's a lot of people that have nostalgia for that, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those where I'd be watching if the prices come down. Hazel Dan, I think the losses are good to hear about too. Yeah, that's why. So I don't know if anybody watch, or I'm sure a lot of people do watch Dave with Comic Book Investments. He's got like twice as many subs as I do. So I definitely watch his channel. So that's Dave with Comic Book Investments. And he's done this for a couple years. I've seen him do it. Saw him do it, I think last year too. He does his like 10 biggest wins and 10 biggest losses. And I saw that and I was like, I think that's really good to talk about, because I think a lot of people are afraid to take a loss. And sometimes you just, you got to sell the book and move on. If you're a dealer, if you're someone who's selling. And so I think it's important to kind of like put that out there that not every book sells for a profit. Sometimes you're breaking even or you're selling for a loss. And for me, that G.I. Joe was definitely one of my big losses. Let's see. I really worry about shipping big value books. So that's one of so with my insurance. Oh, this was another one that I thought was going to be interesting what this went for. This is a 181. It's a 9.0, but it's missing the value stamp. And so that's why it has that green label. If you're not familiar, you get, they'll above a certain grade. If the book would grade like a 2.5 or below, I think the highest I've ever seen a blue label missing the Marvel value stamp is a 2.5. And so what they'll do is if it's 2 full grades or more above that, if the book presents 2 full grades or more above that, they'll give it a green label. And so in this case, it was a 9.0 white pages. I mean, let's take a look at this thing. I mean, a really, nice presenting copy. It's got some spine ticks for sure. But nice presenting copy. No wear on the edges. It looks like all the wear is the spine. Let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I probably would have given this an 8.5. A lot of spine ticks for a 9. I probably would have given it an 8.5. But yeah, I'm not the grader. So, but yeah, but a 9.0 white pages, and I had this one estimated at 4,500 and went for 4,920. And so by comparison, a 9.0 universal, I think is around 9,000. So let's see here. Because this is definitely a book I've been watching some too, because I wouldn't mind getting a copy, but I still think they've got some room to come down. So yeah, 9,500 was the last sale for a blue label 9.0. If we kind of like follow that trend, it's almost there, but I still feel like it could drop some more, or at least maybe it stays flat for a while until it catches up. So definitely, one that I think there's still some room to come down in it, but that's where you can see it sold for about half of the last sale. It all depends on the grade. When the grade's a little lower, I've seen it go for about 60 to 65%. And this one, as you get to higher grades, they're going to sell for a smaller percentage. Like if you had a 9.8 qualified, I doubt that book is going to sell for $35,000. It might sell for 8, something like that, 8 to 10. But I don't think it's going to sell for half. And so that's where you get a range. It's going to be a smaller and smaller percentage as the grade gets higher and higher. But let's see here. But back to this about shipping big value books. So the insurance that I have is dealer insurance. And so my insurance covers me for shipping. Now you can also, you can also buy like the post office insurance, that kind of stuff. And so I usually had a rule before I had the dealer insurance. I had a rule for myself, whereas if something was over $1,000, I would buy the insurance to cover it. And that's my own cost. That's to protect me. I'm not charging the person extra for that or anything. That's for me to protect me. And then if it was above 400, I would do signature. And if it was above 1,000, I would add insurance as well. That was just kind of like my rule. I didn't want to add it for everything because the expense is so high. And so I was willing to risk, that loss up to a point. And then above that, though, I wanted to, I would buy the insurance. So let's see here. I need your help. I purchased a book from Heritage back on September 25th, an ASM 300 signature series. If you zoom in on the image, there's what looks like a scuff marks on the Venom black area. I did notice Newton rings right over same area of the scuff marks. Would you get this reholdered? Reholdering a 9.8 is always a risk. It most likely you will get it back a 9.8. I mean, mostly. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to check and make sure that there hasn't been any like shifting damage or something like that, because then you could end up having a book come back a lower grade. But would I get it reholdered? No, I don't reholder for Newton rings. I don't reholder for case scuffs. I do have one book that has some cracks even cracks on the outside. If they're small, I don't reholder. If it's really big, I will consider it. Because I mean, to me, it's the book is the important part, not necessarily the case. And especially like Newton rings, like if you're holding the book, more than like 2 feet from your face, you generally can't see the Newton rings. So I just don't care. And so, but that's me. So, some people I know really don't like the Newton rings, are really picky about, scuffs or scratches or that kind of stuff. And if you are, if it's going to bother you when it's on the shelf, then go ahead, get it reholdered. If it's on the back, I think you said, let's see, it's over Venom, so it's on the front. If it's going to bother you, do it. It's going to cost you $50 plus shipping if you're okay with that. I mean, it's not like it's that expensive for reholdering, especially if you bought a 9.8. You were comfortable spending thousands of dollars for that book. And so if you want to get it reholdered, just know there is always a risk that it doesn't come back the same grade. That's always a risk, and it's on CGC's site. They make sure they tell you. But I mean, I've seen people. I saw someone reholder their Ultimate Fallout 4 variant 9.8 to get the miles label. That's a $35,000+ book. To get the miles label, and so, I mean, people do it. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So Robert, yeah, you pack 50 to 100 or 100 books a week, and I've learned to pack properly. Yeah, there are definitely ways to do it. I mean, my older brother, he also buys and sells comics, and he ships a lot more than I do. We tend to sell different price range books. I tend to sell a little more expensive books, and so I tend to ship less books per week. So I think he usually uses one piece of cardboard, and he just tapes directly to that, not the two and all this kind of stuff. So, like I said, it's all about what you're willing to risk in the shipment. If you sell a book worth 100,000, you putting that value on the shipping box. That's one of the risks with international shipping. But when you're shipping when you're shipping domestically, you don't have the value written on the box. That's also the benefit of having a third-party insurance, because yes, that is something that crosses my mind, that even though what the book is insured for isn't on the box, I assume it is in the post office system or the FedEx system or whatever it is. And so somebody there can see that, and they can be like, oh, that's $100,000 item in there. Maybe that gets lost. And so yeah, that's definitely something that I think about. But man, with $100,000 book, I almost feel like you got to hand deliver that or like pick it up, have somebody like fly out and pick it up. If you're dropping that kind of money, I have no idea how Heritage deals with that. If they just ship them out or what, like when someone buys a book that costs $1 million, do they ship it? Does the person that bought it send someone there to pick it up for them? I mean, if you're buying $1 million book, I assume you got somebody you can like send to do those things. But I probably wouldn't want that, shipped out and like sitting on my porch because I mean, like FedEx, like they don't always require, even though they say they require the signature, they say I signed for it. A lot of times they'll say it'll show up and it says I signed for it and I didn't. That happened today. And so I had a box, sitting out there, and I was like, oh man, like I don't like that. So yeah, if you had like $1 million book or something sitting out there, I would probably want to go pick it up by hand. Let's see. That blue cover looks nice. I don't know which one that was. But let's see. Trying to move my books, but people keep referencing eBay last sale. Problem is, I was eBay's last sale. Yeah. Well, I mean, that just means that that's not the person you're going to sell the book to. That is one of the things that you just end up having to deal with. People reference GPA, some sale that happened, or that's just part of being in. When you're selling, you're in retail, and you're going to have people that want the book for the price that you paid. That's just part of it. And so, that's just. Sometimes you just have to say, like, sorry, I'm not willing to sell it for that, and move on. I have an ASM 1990 condition except for a quarter size water stain in the back cover. I believe, if I remember correctly from ETA Nick's card, like a quarter size, like max grade is like a 7.0. And that's about what I saw. I think that's around what it was. And that's about what I saw. I had a Marvel Premiere 15. I think that's what it was. And it was a 7.0 and had like about a quarter size stain on the back cover. And so I think that's probably around what you might get. A lot of times it depends how dark it is, all of that, but probably around a 7.0. Yeah, I haven't had any problems with USPS. I've shipped USPS for every single book for the last 4 years. So, I mean, I haven't had any issues with them. So I can't really complain. But yeah, I know FedEx is fine too, but I've just generally found that neither of them seem to be requiring the signature, whether you pay for the signature service or not, which is always super frustrating. Yes, Ant-Man 3 was a solid 8 for 10 for me. I don't get the hate. I haven't seen it yet. It's weird. Like, you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, and the audience score or whatever is pretty high. I think it's like 84%, 83%, something like that. And then, but all I hear is that it was terrible. So like, there's some people that clearly liked it, but yeah, I have no idea if I'm going to like it or not. We'll see. I'm planning on seeing it, hopefully within the next week or so. But yeah, no, I haven't seen it yet. Let's see. My Hulk 181.70 has rings. Yeah, I mean, I have a number of books that have. I had one. I used to have this Batman 251 that was like the entire front cover was Newton rings. It was the most Newton rings I've ever seen on one book. But it's fine. I mean, when it's, like I said, like once you had to hold at an angle to see him, and like once it was like 2 feet away from you head on, you couldn't even see him. Yeah, Hazel Dan, there's a YouTube video on how to get rid of Newton rings. Yes, I've definitely seen those, that there are a number of ways you can use, either like heat, and then I think like sliding like a real thin like sheet of paper like through the edge, and you can kind of like separate the the plastic that's on the outside from the plastic on the inner well. There are definitely ways that you can go about doing it that's going to make it so you don't have to spend money to have it reslabbed. Because if you're sending the book in to get reslabbed, there is no guarantee that book is coming back without Newton rings or with less Newton rings. It might come back with more of them. So that is definitely a possibility there. Yeah, for that I'd fly to them. Yeah, for sure. That's how I feel. That's what I feel like. I'm like, if I was buying something that expensive, I would be like, I'd have like the suitcase with like the what is it, like handcuffs or whatever, like tied to my wrist and all that kind of stuff. What's your opinion on conserved books, better than restored or the same? So technically, a conserved book is just a restored book. It's just a restored book with a very specific type of restoration. So there are, so if you go to CGC's website, you can see what the rules are for how something, when something is graded as conserved versus when it's a restored label. But conserved is just, it's A1 restoration. So professional, small amount, but a very specific type generally of A1 restoration. Is I think how they used to describe it, but I've definitely seen books that have had large amounts of what is it? Leaf casting done to the cover, getting the conserve label. So even though they used to say it was like a specific type of A1, it's definitely not just that, because I've seen it where it's larger than the surface area that's supposed to be a 1 that has been leaf casted. So, but they have their rules that are on there. FedEx doesn't just leave it at the door. They often leave it at someone else's door. I have not had that happen. I have had a USPS box left at someone else's door before that was being shipped to me. And it had my Beyond 27 in it that I ended up getting graded and got a 5.5. I mean, one of the nicest copies, the second nicest copy out there of that book, and almost was lost. I was just lucky that one of my neighbors decided that they would bring it over to my house. So random question, thoughts on CGC custom labels? I mean, I honestly prefer the regular label. I mean, my favorite label is the pedigree label. I love the gold label, but I think it's one of those things that's just personal opinion. The reason I like the regular labels is I like having all the details on the front of the book. And when you get a custom label, a lot of the details get pushed to the back. And that's the thing that I personally don't like about them. But I mean, I think they're fine. I don't have anything against them. I think I should skip all Marvel movies till Silver Surfer. The question is, when are we? I mean, that could be a long time from now. I have no idea when we're actually going to get Silver Surfer. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know. I haven't, my personal opinion on the Marvel movies for Phase 4. I mean, for me, I liked Black Widow. That's probably my favorite one of the Phase 4 movies, because it was just like a fun action movie. I know a lot of people didn't like how, they did Taskmaster and that kind of stuff, but I generally liked Black Widow. I thought it was a fun movie. It was a lot of action. It felt like a Captain America type movie. The only thing I didn't like about that one was that I feel like they overpowered her in the movie. They made her, that's one of the things that's always appealing about like her and Hawkeye, is that they are regular people. And they basically made her like Captain America. She was like falling like 2 stories and was fine and that kind of stuff. But I mean, other than that, I stopped watching Love and Thunder after 30 minutes. I haven't seen Black Panther yet, just because I just didn't hear any real great things, so I wasn't motivated to see it. Doctor Strange was like okay, but there were a lot of parts I really didn't like. Shang-Chi was good except for the final act. I enjoyed it except for the final act. I didn't really care for that. I mean, it's been a lot of like kind of like meh, kind of like meh. That's all I can really say for it. So I have very high expectations for Guardians 3. I'm probably gonna like end up, it's gonna hurt me because I'm going into that movie with high expectations. It's because Guardians 1 is like my number 1 or number 2 Marvel movie. I love Guardians 1, and Guardians 2 was kind of like middle ground for me. I felt like they went a little over the top on some things, but it was still fun. But I really hope Guardians 3 is good. I have a lot of high expectations for that movie. Most of the bad comments come from DC fanboys. Some reason MCU DC movies have become like sports teams. I mean, when I posted on Instagram that I didn't like the Flash trailer, I got more comments than I've gotten on almost any post in a long time. I was told by so many people that they loved the Flash trailer, but I didn't like it. To me, it looked like the same old DC stuff that we've gotten, where it's just like too much going on in one movie, all that kind of thing. But yeah, when I said I didn't like that trailer, I heard about it and why I was wrong. Do you think we'll go back to 15 to 20% returns on comic sales? I don't think we've ever really had, I mean, certain books can do that, but a lot of books, it's like inflation, type increases in prices. 15 to 20% is a lot. There are certain books that have done that historically for very long periods of time. When you're talking about big keys, but I mean, to expect that level of return, I wouldn't. I mean, that is high, but again, if you buy the right types of books, you might be able to see that kind of thing, but that does seem very high. Let's see. Oh, you said you sold your Disney stock. You're all out on this then. Yeah. Thor: Love and Thunder was unwatchable. You lasted around 25 minutes. Yeah. Now the thing is, I've heard, so this is one of the things I saw on Dave with Comic Book Investments channel. He said, if you watch it from the perspective of it being a comedy, he really liked it. Like as a Marvel movie, he said it was terrible, but as like a comedy, he said it was great. And so maybe that's how I need to go into that movie, is just like be like, oh, this is some random comedy I'm watching, not trying to watch it from the perspective of a Marvel movie. Let's see here. Oh yeah, what did that Iron Man 55 go for? There was an Iron Man 55 15412. Let's see. Oh, just missed it. 528. That's a strong sale. I had that at 400. So for a raw VG plus, $528. This book has held up surprisingly well. I think maybe it's because of that the first appearance of Star Fox, has helped give it something else to push it up. But yeah, it's held up surprisingly well. Let's see here. I think there are a couple Journey and a Mystery books I was watching that are going to come up eventually. But let's see. I bought a Batman 251 signed by Neil Adams from Heritage. However, it's got a purple label, slight color touch on cover. It's the only one on Census. What do you think the book is worth? I mean, that is not an easy question to answer. I mean, because it depends. The way that I often look at restored books, the way I often price them is I will look at what do I think the grade would be after the restoration is removed. And so it all depends what that slight color touch is. Slight color touch can be a lot or a little. You can have like a C1 and it's like all over the spine, and so if you had to have it removed, it would just, maybe it drops the book from like a 9.4 to a 6.0. And so then, you value it like a 6.0 would be valued. But if it's like one spot, like one tiny spot on the cover, and you take it off and it drops it to a 9.2 or a 9.0, then maybe the value is a lot higher. It depends how much there is, and it depends how much there is and where it is and what type, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's why it's hard to say. I don't know without really knowing what the type of restoration is and maybe what it would take to remove it. Do I have any room on that Tech 68? I think I do have a little bit. If you want to reach out to me, on Instagram, that's the easiest way. Because for one thing, on Instagram, I will give a better price than I have it on eBay, because I can back out a lot of those fees. So yes, if you are interested in that, reach out to me on Instagram. We can talk about it. That is one book that I've also been. It's like if it doesn't sell, I've been considering. Oh, and I love this cover. This Journey into Mystery. A lot of people I know have said that this should have been like the cover for 83. Like this would have been an awesome cover for the first appearance of Thor. But what did that one go for? Went for 516. I had it estimated at 600, so went a little low. And that one had peaked at $1,100 for a 5.5. But I think that's such a cool cover. I think it's one of the really good early Thor covers. I use a box at UPS store to receive CGC returns and purchase, avoids missed deliveries. Yeah, so I use a PO box for a lot of stuff as well. But some places only ship FedEx, or I prefer FedEx from them, and so then you're kind of, you're using UPS store. But I was talking about PO box. So yes, that would be another way that you could address that. But that's part of the reason why I like the PO box, is that it makes it so I don't ever have to worry about that. I always have it, being received somewhere else, and I can just go pick it up. Those kids though who watched Love and Thunder will be buying your comics 15 years from now. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing though. Are they going, how many kids? I don't know. That's right. It's hard for me to really view like what someone younger maybe thought of that. Like, I mean, there are definitely movies that I saw when I was a kid that I loved that I probably, like, as an adult would have thought they were terrible. And so, yeah, I mean, it's possible that maybe the younger generation, really liked it. I can't see Gore the God Killer played by Christian Bale as a comedy. Yeah, I know, but it's like that's what it seems almost like that how it was done. Got to make an Insta. Keep hearing about Instagram sales. Yeah, I mean, I talk about that on the channel quite a bit. Especially when you're like, for myself, one of the things that obviously that I really like to collect is Golden Age books, and if you are into something that is rare like that, you have to give yourself as many opportunities as possible to come across them, to find them. I mean, like that Okajima book I got that was from, the period when she was in the internment camp, was an Instagram sale. And I didn't even know that book was coming up. And I like I was watching, and I was just watching this sale, and it was on Instagrails. I think that's where that one was selling. I think it was an Instagram sale. And the person, brought it up. It was from Prince of Cheese. I talked about this in the video. It was from Prince of Cheese. He was the seller. And he brought it up, and he said it was an Okajima book. And I, like, my ears just immediately, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to buy this book. I was like, and when he said what it was, like what I can't remember if he said the year or not, but I knew it instantly. It was from that period. I was like, I will buy it. And there were like 3 or 4 of us at least that claimed it. And luckily my internet was the fastest. And so I got it. But that's an example where, just the fact that I was watching that one Instagram claim sale, I got that one. Like, an Instagram claim sale is where I got my Suspense Comics 11. It's where I got my Suspense Comics 8, like super rare Golden Age books. And, like you have to, if you're into that kind of stuff, you have to give yourself opportunities. And beyond just that, there's, there are plenty of sales. Like if you're into Silver Age, Bronze, Modern, all that kind of stuff, there are live sales going on all the time on there, and claim sales, on pages where people post books. And it gives you other opportunities to find some of this stuff. Is Instagram a good way to sell? I mean, it depends how you want to do it. I've talked about that, where I could probably hold an Instagram live sale, and I'd probably do fairly well in it. But one of the things is I don't like shipping. And so the idea of selling like 50 books at once, or 40 books or something, and having to ship all of them like within a day or two just sounds horrible to me. And so I like eBay, where I sell, like a couple, and then I ship those. And so that's one of the reasons that's really held me back from that. But I mean, obviously people do a lot of sales on there. I mean, I buy a lot of books from people on Instagram. And so, I would say it probably is a pretty good way to sell. The tricky part with Instagram though, is that you have to have a following, or you have to leverage someone that has a following. And so that's where things like, it looks like it just ended. So that's where, maybe I'll close this out then. So that's where having these sites like Elite Comics 11 and Instagrails and all that kind of stuff, where they have huge followings and people leverage them to sell their stuff. Because, if you don't want to spend the time to build up a following so that you can have enough people watching your sale to actually be able to sell books, then you can use that. But I mean, I think I have like 5,000 subs or something on Instagram. And so I probably have enough where I can do that. But, that took years to get to that point. And so it's not a quick process of building up a following on Instagram. It's like YouTube. It's relatively, it's like a slow burn. I know in a recent video you said even your brother wouldn't tell you who he was buying from. But you care to shout out maybe just one Insta seller to get me started? Well, and that's what I'm saying. One of the places I really do recommend is going to Elite Comics 11 or Instagrails. So if you follow those, they hold live sales. And so what they do is they aren't really the ones selling the book. They are a proxy selling the book for someone else. And they have thousands of subs, I think tens of thousands. And so they leverage their subscriber base. And so if you follow Elite Comics 11, then they're going to have a live sale almost daily, if not daily, sometimes multiple sales a day. And they are backing those sellers like that. I mean, I've talked to them before. Like if that seller, and usually they're not going to, sellers not going to screw you. They're good. I've had good experiences with the sellers on there, but if you had a problem and that seller was difficult, they're going to help take care of you. But that's one of the best places to start at those really big, like consigners. And then you're going to be able to see lots of books that get posted daily, and you're going to have a lot of live sale options. And then, follow people like I follow Golden Age Guru. I bought a number of books from him. And his friend Eric, I talked to his friend Eric. He's like a big Matt Baker collector, and they do live sales periodically. And so those are people that you can definitely follow. And just when they have a live sale, you just make sure you got to put the alerts on so that they come up, and you have your opportunity to buy those. But yeah, Prince of Cheese. There you go. Do I know John? I'm assuming maybe you mean John that hosts the sales on Instagrams, but I don't know him, but I've talked to him. I think it's John. I think that's right. Let's see. Yeah, my brother is but he helped me in a lot of other ways. He helped me when I was really learning about grading, that kind of thing. But when it comes to, those sources for when you're finding comics, like people are pretty secretive. Yeah, IG need trust and reputation, but a great place to transact, cheaper avoidance fees, that kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely about building up trust. When you buy stuff from people, pay right away. Like you build up a reputation. If you are somebody who screws around and doesn't pay people, or is like, or takes a long time to close out, when you bought stuff, like that is going to set you up poorly right away. Like when I buy something from someone, they send me that invoice, I am paying it immediately. That is how you want to do it. You want to be someone that people trust, that you're going to pay. And when somebody pays you, that you're going to ship, that you're going to provide tracking information, all that kind of stuff. It's all about making sure that you're a reputable person there. Nervous. So you're talking about what happened with Mickey, where he had that trade that went south. Now that was a trade, that wasn't a sale. So with a sale, there are different ways you can protect yourself. One is making sure that it's somebody that is reputable. But two, if you're buying, just make sure you buy with like PayPal goods and services, something like that. If you're buying with friends and family, or if you're paying with Venmo or Cash App or whatever it is, you have no protection. Like now that's why, like, there are a number of people that will only sell to you if you're doing friends and family. And when that's the case, just make sure that you trust that person, that it's coming from a reputable seller, because you definitely don't have protection in that case. Now, as the seller, you're fine. like the other person is the one that needs to trust you, really, because they're giving you money and then you're sending them something. So as a seller, I'm not really, that's the other person that should be more concerned. But yeah, no, appreciate it. I always like to try to answer questions. That's why I like doing these, these live streams, trying to do it once a month, to justify me paying for the StreamYard account, because I think this thing costs me like $25 a month. And so, like, if I do one stream a month, maybe it kind of like justifies it. Let's see. Yeah, an IG reputation is big. It definitely is. It's important that you are a trustworthy person on there. Let's see. Grails Comics and Elite Comics 11 are great places to build a following, but you have to have a stock to be a seller on this. Well, you have to have a stock to be a live seller. but you can still sell individual books with them. So that's where you reach out to them. They have, I don't know what their fees are. I haven't ever done it, but I don't know if it's like 5% or 7% or 8% or whatever it is. But yeah, you would reach out to them and you say like, I have this book that I want to sell, and they would, you know, you send them the pictures, they post the book, and then they get a cut of the sale price. So that's how you can do that with individual books. It doesn't have to be a live sale, but yes, if you're doing a live sale, you've got to at least have enough books to handle, you know, a live sale. All right. So I think, you know, we've been on for about an hour and 45 minutes. Unless there are any other questions that anybody has, you know, the auction has ended. It starts up again tomorrow. This one was actually a little smaller than what it's normally been. It's still split with 2 days, but this one only had about 450 items for the first half. A lot of times they've been getting up to 600. So this is definitely a little bit smaller auction than it's been in the past. But yeah, no, so it ended a little bit quicker than normal, but appreciate everybody joining the chat. And always fun doing this. And, you know, make sure you go check out the other videos, watch the channel, you know, like the videos, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I will see you on the next one.